All right, so hello class of 2024. My name is Nekesa Straker and I serve as the Dean of First Year Students. I want to thank you all for coming to tonight's info session on the rising sophomore housing process. Our goal tonight is to provide you with information on how the process works and to hear from proctors and paths about their experience with the housing process and transitioning into the houses. We want to emphasize that we understand many of you are nervous about this process or feel as though you haven't had time to meet many classmates to form blocking groups. We know that this is especially true for our international students. While this year is different, and it's a different year in terms of social interactions, in normal years, in all honesty, most students have the same feelings that you all have right now. While blocking groups are a part of the housing lottery experience, they are not the end-all be-all of the experience. They are in many ways just the beginning of the 3 years that you will have living in the houses. And in fact, if a sophomore is in a blocking group of 8, they are most likely not going to live directly with all of the people in their blocking groups, as you will only be living with a fraction of those students as sophomores. The most common blocking groups that we know of are those of 8 and those of 1. So we want to make sure that we emphasize that so everyone's aware of that. So we in the FYE office, including the resident deans, proctors, and paths, will continue to work with you all throughout the rest of this semester and the spring to put you at ease. We hear you, and we hope that after this presentation, you will feel a little less stressed. And at the beginning of the spring semester, we will be working with the first year social committee and your resident deans to provide continued opportunities for those who want to connect with their classmates. With that being said, we need to hear and we want to hear from you about what you think your needs are. So I encourage all of you, if you have ideas of how to continue to connect with people or to help in creating blocking groups, that you reach out to me directly. I will put my email in the chat, but you can reach out to me directly with any ideas that you have, as I work very closely with the first year social committee and the deans and everyone who's here to make sure that you are at ease as we enter this process. So with that all being said, I'm going to pass it over to Karina, and she's going to guide you through the rest of the presentation. I'm going to put my video off, but I will come back at the end when we have a question and answer session and help moderate those questions as they come in. So thank you for being here, and Karina, it's all you.
Thank you, Nekesa. Good evening. As Nekesa mentioned, my name is Karina Mainavelli. I'm the Director of Housing for the college, and I'm going to be sharing with you today some information about the lottery and how we run the lottery out of the housing office. A lot of what I'm going to be saying may be repeated at later times, just to be focusing on different aspects of that. So please bear with us, and we'll try to answer any and all of your questions as we keep going. So let's start at the beginning. What is the purpose of the lottery? So the purpose of the lottery is to randomly assign current first year students or rising sophomores to one of our 12 houses. Factors such as legacy status, religion, athletic affiliation, and siblings are not considered. It is, as I mentioned before, random lottery, so we do not take any of those things into consideration. What we do is to take into consideration, of course, students with documented medical needs. And Grace Mascola here in our panel is the director of the Accessible Education Office, or the AEO, and she's here to answer any questions students may have about what could be considered a special accommodation for housing based on medical needs. You may also reach out to our office, collegehousing@fas.harvard.edu, if we don't answer your questions, or if you think of questions, have concerns at a later time. We can always be reached at that email address. Some important dates to keep in mind. The first one is January 29th, Friday, and this is the deadline for students who are seeking specific housing accommodations for medical reasons to reach out and file an application with the Accessible Education Office for those accommodations. There are meetings with the AEO staff that are required, so we recommend that you reach out to the AEO as soon as possible if you have questions or concerns. Another important date is, of course, Housing Day, which this year, or excuse me, next year is going to be Friday, March 12th. So some lottery lingo. So some of the terms we use when running the lottery. The first one, as you all have heard, is a blocking group. And what it is a group of up to 8 students. Mixed gender groups are fine. And these students will enter the lottery together. And we will guarantee that these up to 8 students will be assigned to the same house. As I mentioned before, students may also enter the lottery as a group of 1. I know Nekesa stressed this, and I want to stress it again, is that students who are in the same blocking group don't all typically share the same suite. Each of the houses will run senior and junior lotteries, and what that means is that seniors will pick their housing first. Then juniors will go in and select their housing second. And the spaces that are left are going to be used to house sophomores by the house administrator. So sophomores could be split up into several different suites in order to make the housing work. They will always try to keep the groups as large as they can, but it is possible that you would be broken down into smaller groups just to make the housing work. Linked groups are when 2 blocking groups decide to link to each other. And what that means is that we will not place those linking groups or linked groups in the same house, but in the same neighborhood. And as you can see, the neighborhoods are listed below: the Quad, River East, River Central, and River West. There is also the option of the Dudley community, which are students who choose to live off campus. They would affiliate with the Dudley community. As it states, even if you are planning to move off campus, you still should plan on entering the lottery. Blocking groups of 1. Even if you're entering the lottery as a blocking group of 1, you still have to enter the lottery and you still have to register. And I'll go into that a little bit later. You can link to another group of 2 to 8 students. What you cannot do is to link with another blocking group of 1. So that's the only exception. The blocking group of 1 cannot link to a blocking group of 1. They can go together as a blocking group of 2, but they cannot link. And as we've mentioned before, blocking groups of 1 are quite common. Blocking 101. So every group has to have a group leader. And this group leader, you decide amongst yourselves who that person would be. They will need to go to our residential portal and create a group. They will need to set up a group name, appropriate names, please, and set up a password. And then he or she will share that group name and password with group members. The group leader should just be mindful of who they're sharing that information with. You just want to make sure that you share it with folks that you actually want to be a part of your group. And then each member of the blocking group has to register and join the blocking group to submit their application. Linking. Blocking groups, when they're linking, as we mentioned before, it can be of different sizes and have different gender composition. They're guaranteed to be in the same neighborhood, but only the group leader in each of the 2 groups can actually form the link. And confirmation email will be sent to both. So the group leader would be the one whose responsibility it is to link to another group if that's what you choose to do. And just for clarification purposes, linking is not a requirement for entering the lottery. Some final notes. So all first-year students who have completed the fall 2020 term must enter the lottery. Students who, if they took a leave halfway through the fall semester, will return to the yard and do not need to participate. If you submit a group and realize after you've submitted it or created the group that you want to make changes, you will need to reach out to college housing at fas.harvard.edu and let us know of those changes. Please note that each group member has to send an individual email acknowledging and approving any changes. We need to verify or confirm that everyone in that group is that agrees with the decision of whatever change you're requesting. When thinking about group names, we encourage you to be creative, but yet thoughtful and select names that are appropriate, because as it has no bearing in the lottery process, but there are many folks that will be able to see the name you have selected, other students when they're looking for groups to join, as well as the staff in the house that you are assigned to. Another thing I wanted to bring up is all of our houses offer gender inclusive housing. And students who are interested in gender inclusive housing should reach out to their house administrator once they know which house they've been assigned to and ask more information about it, how can they participate, or what they need to do in order to be a part of a gender inclusive housing group. Here is my contact information, as well as Brian Broughton in my office. If you have, again, any questions or anything that we did not cover or come up at a later time, certainly feel free to reach out to any of those email addresses and we'll make sure we get back to you. Next is Kendall Clement. He's one of our proctors in the yard.
Thanks, Karina. Just briefly, congratulations again, class of 2024, on making the most of this unique year. And I'm excited to see you guys as you move on to your houses next year. Just briefly, I have a couple points, stuff that I've seen over my time as a proctor that I'd like to address, stuff that I usually try to address with my entryway, but I think is useful for most students as well. This is my 9th blocking time blocking. I'm a 9th year proctor here, so this is kind of the summary of a bunch of many times of watching students kind of run up against walls, and I hope that some of this advice is useful for you as you are trying to figure out your blocking situation as well. So if you want to hit the next slide. The first one is kind of we've talked about before, is that group size doesn't matter. There's going to be a lot of external pressure to have a big blocking group, whether this is from your parents, from your friends, or from your just own perception of how social you should be or how many friends you should have in your time at Harvard. And I just want to really emphasize that this grouping size doesn't matter for your blocking group. As has been discussed previously, it's important to choose good roommates, and these are not necessarily the same people who are going to be your good friends. And so as you're considering who you're going to block with, just consider what you would like in a roommate versus what you would like in a friend. As we talked about before, each house will have a separate process for assigning roommates. And so even though you won't necessarily have to room with the people in your blocking group, you should probably feel comfortable potentially being a roommate to people in your blocking group, or work that out individually. And then another something I've also seen come up, if you enter the blocking lottery as an individual, as a blocking group of one, this does not guarantee as a single, the house will assign your roommates based on your preference and compatibility later. So just try to select some people that you get along with, people that you're interested in having and developing relationships with in the coming years, and people you consider good friends and roommates. The next slide. Something that's also undervalued, I think, is the importance of transparent and compassionate conversations. And ultimately, these are going to be you may have very difficult conversations with people, perhaps who have may have different expectations for whether they belong in your group or not, or what they thought was going to happen. And it's important to have these transparent conversations early and often. the later on it gets towards the housing deadline, the harder these conversations are to have. And if you're very upfront and very open early on, that can avoid a lot of painful conversations later. And then just also, as the blocking deadline approaches, there will be a lot of changes that are going to happen. Ultimately, these are the most, I guess, the people generally feel somewhat comfortable about their blocking situation until almost about the last week, and then it kind of goes a little bit crazy. And so especially as you're approaching this blocking deadline, be very explicit about who is in your blocking group and make sure that everybody knows who's in your blocking group. And if people aren't in your blocking group, try to have a compassionate conversation early on and to let them know that while you think they're a good friend and while you enjoy their company, you may not be the best blockmate, and let them kind of work things out as well. Ultimately, I think this is important. Sorry, this is, if you haven't had this kind of a difficult conversation, this is one you're going to have many times throughout your life, whether you're choosing business partners, choosing someone to live with for the rest of your life. This is these tough conversations are important, and this is a great time to learn how to have these conversations. And ultimately, your PAFs and your proctors and everybody else in FYE are out there ready to support you, and we're ready to help you through these tough conversations. And so don't be afraid to reach out for support. This blocking process is somewhat unique to Harvard. And so you may find it challenging to talk to your friends or family back home who may not really understand the stress or the impact of this decision. And feel free to reach out to your proctors and PAFs who have all been through this before. We can help in many different ways. We're happy to, for example, I found it helpful with my students to role play difficult conversations. This can help you find the right words to tactfully navigate these conversations. So if you want to run through, if you have a situation, for example, the person you have been rooming with, for example, on campus here, you're not sure if you want to block with them and you want to run through this conversation once with someone, feel free to reach out to a proctor and PAF and be like, hey, I'd like to practice this, role play this conversation. And running it through 1 or 2 times with the proctor or PAF can help you really figure out what are the right words to say and how to tactfully approach this without offending or, I guess, burning these bridges. So there's a couple tips, but really I know that we're all kind of virtually connected, but don't feel afraid to reach out, and we really want to make this a good experience for everybody. And I think together we're excited to help and to support you in all these different ways. Karina, do you want to introduce the PAFs, or I think sorry, go for it.
Yes, thank you very much. So next we have Francis, Kobe, and Matt, who are the folks you really want to hear from, not us. The students who have lived through this whole experience and who are experts in anything lottery and blocking group related. So I will call on them individually and allow them to introduce themselves. I'll start with Matt, who happens to be first on my monitor.
Hi, thanks, Karina. Hi, everybody. My name is Matt. I, along with Kobe and Francis, am one of the Eagle PAFs this year, which is a funny name for one of the student leaders of the PAF program. I am a senior living in Kirkland, who's lived in Kirkland, I guess, for 2 years now. And I have now been a PAF for 3 years, and I PAF for WIG-G. So shout out to anyone who's from my entryway. Now, I just wanted to say a few things about the blocking process and kind of share what it's like from the student perspective. And just a few things that I remember that I was stressed about, and some wisdom maybe to pass on to you, and hopefully if you find some of it useful. So the first is echoing what's been said already by a couple of different people. And I just want you, just a reminder to make sure that though the limit for the blocking group number is 8 people, just do not focus on that number 8. I know it's already been said that 8 might be the most common number for blocking group, but I think blocking group of 1 is the second most common number. So it's very common for people to go into the housing lottery in a blocking group just by themselves. And many of my best friends have done it. And one thing that my blocking group, kind of our natural number, we had a group of 6, and then we thought, oh, like maybe we should just get to 8 just to add 2 more people. And it ended up just being worth kind of like causing a little drama and trying to find those last 2 people. And it was ultimately just unnecessary. So just my recommendation would be just having that number kind of in your head. Try to, as much as you can, just really don't feel a pressure to meet it or in any way. And the next thing I want to say is the distinction between blockmates and roommates. There have been a couple questions about this. So the people you block with, just to say it one more time, because I think it's always helpful to hear, are not necessarily who you room with. The people you block with is who's going to be guaranteed to be in your same house. But then you get to make a whole nother decision about who you're going to live with once you're in that house. And some of the best advice I was given is that your best friends don't necessarily make your best roommates. They might, but just the people you're compatible living with are not always the people who you're closest with. Whether that's because you have similar bedtimes, or maybe one of you is really clean and one of you doesn't care so much about having as clean of a room. Sometimes it's just important to know that what makes someone your best friend is not what makes someone your best roommate. So just another thing to keep in mind about blocking is that it does not have to be, and is not kind of a final say about who you room with. And roommates change all the time. I know Francis will talk about that in a minute. And the last thing I want to say is about blocking. It's so much more, it's really just about what house you get put into. And I think the housing system is really one of the best things that Harvard has going for it. Like I said, I'm a proud resident of Kirkland House, which some of you may or may not be familiar with. But each house really has its own unique culture, its own unique community, and its own unique, especially with Kirkland, its own unique quirks. So one of my favorite things about Kirkland is that it really does feel like a community where now some of my closest friends are people who aren't even in my class that I've met through Kirkland, just getting to know them through the dining hall or through the PAF program. And I see them a couple times a day for every meal because we all eat together, and getting to know them that way. And feeling this house community that makes me kind of, by my senior year, your blocking group, it's almost sometimes even hard to remember which friends were your original blocking group, just because your friendship and your friend groups are ever evolving. And for example, I just want to say that like getting put into a house is really exciting. For Kirkland, for example, I didn't know much about it coming in, but I'm wearing a Santa hat because of the season, but also Kirkland is known for its Secret Santa, which is really intense and really over the top, even over Zoom, even remotely. And people really go all out, and it's a blast. And other things like the house community, just how exciting it is to be put in. Kirkland has a winter formal dinner every year at the end of the first semester. And graduating seniors always give speeches. And inevitably in person, some seniors talk about how much they love the house and how much they love the people in it. And they don't focus really on their blocking group. They focus on everyone in the house, from their best friends to the dining hall staff, to the maintenance staff, to the house administrators that they've met. And so just keeping in mind that seniors who speak are often even start crying, talking about how much they love the house. And even over Zoom, there are people giving Zoom speeches. Just last week when we had this dinner over Zoom, still started crying just because of how much they loved it. So just a reminder that while blocking can be really stressful, you're going to not just get put into a house with your blockmates, but you're going to get put into a community with a bunch more people who you'll come to know over the years. And it really will feel like a community. So just keeping that in mind when you go through this process.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. Colby, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Colby. I am currently a senior, and I live in Winthrop House. Winthrop House is my house. I'm also a PAF for Matthews 5. So if we have anyone on here that's from Matthews 5, hello. So also like in the same vein of sharing advice for blocking, sorry, excuse me. I think one really important thing to keep in mind, like you could feel pressure or just like the need to find your core group right now that you're going to block with, but keeping in mind that come blocking period a couple months from now, when you have to submit that official paper of like who your group is going to be, that can most definitely change. And as kind of per the advice that Kendall gave, just being candid and courteous in those conversations is honestly the best scenario for all parties at hand. And just like knowing, like Matt's great advice as well, who's you're going to be your best roommate, who could be your best friend, but also could not be. And it's just really important to be open and honest in those conversations. I also want to add, just because everyone has their own house pride, as a resident of Winthrop House, like each house has a great community, whether it be on the river, whether it be in the quad, whether it be like River East, River West. Each one has perks and pluses and minuses as well to it. My personal favorite is right behind Karina in Winthrop. The Winthrop Library is brand new and just one of my favorite places to work on campus. So just to really be excited about the whole process, but also knowing that nothing you do with respect to blocking or housing is completely set in stone, and just realizing what's best for you as a student. And that even if you choose something that's best for you sophomore year and you live with these people, that once you live with them and you find junior year you don't want to, then that's also something that can change as well. So keeping that in mind, that whatever decisions you make now isn't something that binds you for the rest of your Harvard experience.
Thank you, Colby. Is there any tradition that is a Winthrop tradition?
One of my, I don't know if this is a tradition because it was fairly new, but we had like a Women in Winthrop thing, that there would be different just group events that could be either like, sometimes we'd get like a spa to come and there'd be like manicures and massages, and different just like wine nights or fun things like that. If you're of age, that would be really, really fun. So
that sounds amazing. Thank you. Lastly, but surely not least, Frances, if you would like to share it with us.
Hi, everybody. So like Matt and Colby, I'm a senior and I'm one of the Eagle Paths, and I path in Strauss. So if any of my entryway students are on the Zoom call, a special hello to all of you. I am the resident quadling Courier House proud on this call. And I just want to say, I know that a lot of you are probably hearing some things about the quad. A lot of you are probably sitting here thinking, you know, I don't want to end up in Courier, Cabot, or FOHO come March. That's very common, but as Colby said, and as all our panelists have said, one, all of the houses are beautiful and amazing and unique in their own way. And I know people who were sobbing on housing day when they found out that they got Courier, who turned into people sobbing senior year when they're at the senior dinner in Courier because they love the community and they can't ever think of leaving it. So I just want you all to keep an open mind. Yes, and as Brian said, quad rooms are honestly amazing. We have more singles on campus than any other house, so you have that to look forward to if Courier, Cabot, and FOHO come knocking on your door. So I just want to get that out of the way and to say, you know, I think a big part of the blocking process is kind of channeling adult decision-making powers and adult compassion, especially what Kendall said in terms of having honest conversations with people. You're, you know, all 18, 19 years old. You're all responsible enough to be open with people about who you want to block with and not, you know, keep secrets or try and, you know, play games around this process. The other thing I want to say about being an adult, as someone who's a quadling, please try really hard not to cry for me when I show up to Dorm Storm or Zoom Storm, you guys. I think housing day, you obviously have your favorite for your house, but I think it's important to keep an open mind and to try to be really excited whoever comes knocking on your door. Because like I said, they're all really amazing, wonderful. Courier has segways that we like to ride around. But about my own blocking experience, so I had a blocking group of 4 people and we all lived together sophomore year. And we had a great time living together, a wonderful suite with 2 bathrooms for 4 people, which was truly an upgrade from Canada. But you know, as friendships, they're complicated and they grow apart. So by my junior year and my senior year, I wasn't living with my blocking group anymore because I just made new friends in Courier House and had new interesting people to room with. So Matt made the difference between blockmates and roommates, how you don't necessarily have to room with your blockmates. I just want to make sure that everybody's, you know, thinking about how this decision that you're making now, you're not determining your best friends for life. You're not determining the people who are going to be at your wedding. You're not determining the people who are going to be in your photos 50 years from now. Honestly, blocking is the process for you guys to get assigned a house. And sometimes these people are your best friends and sometimes it doesn't work out that way. But either way, you get this wonderful, beautiful house community. I particularly love Courier because it's named after 4 women and 4 Radcliffe alum, and it's the only house at Harvard that's named after women. So we all just have our different ways of relating to our house and relating to our blocking groups. And I know people are stressed, but you know, it's not that deep. It may seem stressful, it may seem like this, you know, really, really important Harvard tradition, but you'll get through it, everybody does, and you'll love what happens on the other end, I promise. I think we may be turning it over to questions now, so I'll throw it back to either Karina or Dean Straker, who might take that over.
All right, yes, I will take it over. And so far we've answered a good amount of questions in the Q&A. So if people have not been paying attention to the Q&A, definitely look there for some of the questions and answers so far. So the one question that we thought it would be good to ask live is from Alex, who's asking, is the school going to do anything to help us meet potential blockmates virtually? And so I think that's a good question. We kind of mentioned it in the beginning of that we will have opportunities in working with the first year social committee to organize types of meet and greets over the fall semester. We've tried to do a couple of those, but we will definitely do ones very similar to, I'm going to date myself, but if you have like matching games or different things like that that you've seen as game shows, we'll have the opportunity to provide those opportunities for students. Past proctors, things that you might have done in the past or things that you would be considering to do this year for your entryways or communities based on allowing people to meet people virtually.
Can I jump in here?
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, just along these same lines, another question that probably everybody's thinking is, how do I find blockmates? Like, where do I find them right now? And I think that there's a couple really good places. I think that a lot of people find really good blockmates in their classes. So as you're sitting in classes in your breakout, maybe in your Zoom breakout group, or doing homework after, like with your group, those are really good places to find good blockmates. You could be like, hey, what are your plans for blocking? Do you know who you're blocking with or whatever? Those are good places. Also in your entryway, all of you have been assigned to an entryway, and those are great people who you may hopefully know a little bit, kind of on a more social basis. And those are great places to look for potential blockmates as well. I think that if you don't feel like you know a lot of people in your entryway, definitely encourage you to attend study breaks. There will be at least 4 study breaks between now and March 12th. And I know in my entryway, we're going to continue to plan events where you can get to know each other, get to know your people in your entryway. And those are great times to get to know potential blockmates.
We've also talked about in the spring doing more cross entryway study breaks and having opportunities where it's not just the same people that you've met in the fall, maybe having the opportunities to meet other people in your yard. So we will definitely try our best to have opportunities for people to meet virtually. But again, we also need ideas from you all, because I think we have in the past scheduled a couple of different events and we're super excited, we're planning them, and then people don't necessarily come. So we definitely want to have these events, but we want buy-in from you, so definitely open for suggestions. And many of you are participating in extracurricular groups or different events or groups on campus that you could also be thinking about how you're working or how you can potentially meet people through that. Study groups, all of those are different opportunities for possible connection. So we have another question of, if we block as a group of 1 but don't know anyone in the house to request as a roommate, will we be assigned a roommate and end up living with someone we don't know?
I can answer that question. So the answer is yes. If you are, if you go in as a blocking group of 1 and you happen to be in a house that the space available is a double or a single or whatever other space available, house administrators will make housing decisions and place students together. They do have criteria or information that they look at to see who would be good roommates together. So there would be a housing questionnaire that they send out to students before they do the housing assignments. What time do you wake up? What time do you go to bed? What kind of music do you like? Are you messy? Are you not messy? And then they use that information to make educated decisions as to who they think would be best living together.
All right, we have another question. There are 2 good questions that we have plenty of time, so I'll answer ask both of these live. So the first question, which came in after the other question, but I think this is a quicker question: are upperclassmen houses or upper level houses suite style?
Upper level houses are mixed. There are houses that have more suites than others, so it really depends on the architecture of the specific housing that you're looking at. But all of them have some suites. Just the percentage of singles versus suites will vary from house to house. But there's a mix of singles and suites in every house.
All right, so this is a good path question. I think this is a nice meaty question, which I definitely appreciate. So John asked, for those who are still with their blockmates and those who aren't, what make good blockmates? What seems like a good idea but really isn't? And because blockmates aren't necessarily going to be your roommates, should one approach choosing blockmates differently? Who wants to answer? Oh, Matt, there we go.
I'll take a stab at this one. A lot of good questions here, John. I know Francis and Colby will also probably have some thoughts. As far as what makes good blockmates, I would say when I was choosing my blockmates, it was generally just who I found were my best friends. Because blockmates are people you will probably end up spending more time with, whether that's like someone whether that's eating meals with them in your house's dining hall, or because a lot of people do room with their blockmates, you might end up rooming with them. I would say it's people who just I enjoyed spending time around. I guess that might look a little bit different for everybody, but really just people who like you really, for whatever reason, enjoy their company. I'm not sure if that's the most helpful thing, but then, oh wait, the question disappeared. I'll try to answer these next ones. Now, okay, so the next part, what seems like a good idea but really isn't. Craig Rogers mentioned this in the chat, and a couple of us wanted to just echo it. Sometimes if you're a first year who has a significant other, it might seem like a good idea to block with them. Francis is shaking her head no. She might have something to add here if you want to chime in, Francis. But yeah, Craig, who is one of the best advice givers on campus, he was formerly, I think he's now with CAMS. He was formerly with the Bureau Study Council. Craig, chime in if you're the ARC maybe. Oh, Nekesa's saying I'm wrong. Whatever. Regardless, listen to Craig. Blocking with the significant other often doesn't work out so great. Francis and Colby, anything you want to add?
Well, to jump in on the significant other point, I think, regardless of how much you care about this person or you think this relationship is going to work out, it's always a really good idea to get to know people beyond them. That's just good life advice, regardless of blocking. And honestly, that's the advice I would give for your earlier questions, John, about how to pick a blockmate. I would say that you should go about it maybe thinking about who is someone that I would like to maybe get to know better. Because the house communities are just much smaller spaces than the communities that you may have been part of as a first year. Courier has about 300 people, so I really just got to know all of these people really well and appreciate everybody in Courier truly so much, and got to know them on an individual level beyond like the massive 1,000+ numbers in the freshman class. And so, blocking, I think of it as someone like, who would you appreciate seeing in your D hall a lot? Who would you appreciate sitting down to have lunch or dinner with when you see them sitting at a table alone? I think those are good ways to approach it. Like I said, these people can end up being your best friends, but I just want to stress, don't worry about it. If they don't, and really don't worry about it if you haven't found your group yet. I know that I really didn't feel keyed into my chosen family on campus until I was like a junior spring. So it takes time. And I saw Colby, you definitely have thoughts.
Yeah, I just have I echo both of what Francis and Matt have said. And I guess this could be just me, but I tend to question things in this sort of way and almost extremes, but you might want to think about it away. And per typical Cambridge weather, if you were to have a huge snowstorm and be stuck in your house and spending a lot of time in your room, who would you want that to be with? And that could be your best friends, but also sometimes you're we have completely different living styles. My friend is not the most neat person and I like things really neat. So just keeping things like that in mind, and almost questioning it in that type of scenario.
This is kind of a question thrown off of that a little bit. Did you all figure out your blockmates by this time of your first year? Yeah, right. So anyone want to elaborate on that?
My confirmed blocking group was not set until a week before that we had to submit our application. So definitely up in the air all the time. I think this is definitely just speaking on my own personal experience, but I'm part of the field hockey team here at Harvard. So a big question was whether or not to block with my teammates or to do all of my teammates or split it up. And I ended up doing kind of a half and half. Some of my teammates that I found I would live better with are in my blocking group. And then we also have some other people just from outside communities at Harvard. And that would just like change, and people like subbed in and out almost of that blocking group up until the final week or so. So just knowing that things will change and different scenarios happen with people, that will just make you kind of iron out the details, and that thankfully can be done very close until the final date.
My blocking group did not finalize until the night before, which I would not recommend pushing it that far. But this just goes to show that I didn't know my blocking group until I was 3 months beyond where you all are now. So if you don't know right now, I didn't either.
Similarly, mine wasn't really set until the spring semester, because I found that, you know, I met a whole bunch of people fall semester, but I met a whole bunch of different people spring semester just by being in different classes, different study groups, being in different clubs, different parts of campus. And some of those people that I met in like January ended up in my blocking group. I just want to say also, maybe this is a trouble that might be more common in a non-Zoom year, that I was having a struggle trying to fit in everybody that I wanted to fit in into my blocking group, because I just had kind of a lot of casual acquaintances from the dining hall or whatever. But I think the takeaway that's relevant for y'all, class of 2024, is that you can see people in your blocking group. You can see people who are not in your blocking group and still be friends with them after you block. I mean, this may be a fairly obvious point, but it is really not that far from the quad to Winthrop. There's a shuttle from the quad to Mather. Like, you will keep your friends no matter where they end up if they're important to you.
Also, if I can chime in on the topic of distance, with respect to where your classes are, all houses, I would say, are about equidistant to the science center and the yard. So if that is a factor that you're like, oh, I can't get this house because it's so far, it's kind of an irrational one, because all of them are about the same distance and length to walk.
That's a very good point. I did a Google Maps when I was trying to figure out the distance from the quad to the yard, and it was maybe 0.1 off from like Mather or something like that. So there was a question earlier related to AEO, and so I just wanted to give Grace a minute to talk about that.
Thanks, Nekesa. Yeah, I just wanted to echo some of this about the distance to classes, that AEO does not play a role in assigning houses. Almost all of the houses are equally accessible, and most students with AEO accommodations can live at in any of the houses. So what we do is we identify individual needs student by student in advance, and we communicate those accommodation needs to the housing office before the lottery takes place. And then if there is a house that we need to take offline because it doesn't meet an accommodation need, we will do that. But it's not an entire group of houses. So there is no accommodation of not being quadded, for example, or I must live near the river in a river house. We do our best to make a good match, but it is still very randomized, just with that accommodation need in mind. So I'm happy to answer any other questions about accommodations, or you can reach out to my team. We're best reached through email these days, aeo@fas.harvard.edu, or we have walk-in hours, walk-in over Zoom on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So you can go to our website and learn more about our walk-in hours and ask any questions that you have.
All right, so it looks like we don't have any more questions in the question and answer box. I'm going to give people a minute to add as many additional questions as you want to the question and answer box. But I also want to have our panelists have kind of like the last word. So if you want to have, like, in your mind, come up with something that you would just want to add for 30 seconds about this experience. Yep, we have some more questions coming in. There we go. We have a whole hour, so we have 14 more minutes. Let's see. Can you tell us about more traditions? So more house traditions.
I can find a Google document that lists all of them. If you answer one of the other questions in the meantime, Nekesa, I'll look for it.
Perfect. All right, so are larger groups / link groups more likely to be placed in the quad? So this is one of those questions where people are trying to figure out how the lottery process works. Maybe Karina?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. So there is no rhyme or reason for who ends up in the quad as far as group size. We've had groups of 1, we've had groups of 8, we have linking groups, we've had any and all size groups. So it doesn't matter if the size of your group as to where you are placed, nor does it matter if you're linked or not, because that was one of the things that I've heard too before. Oh, if you link, you're more likely to go here, or if you link, you're more likely to go there. And that's not the case. It's a random lottery. So the size of your group or whether or not you link does not have any impact on the outcome of the lottery.
Can I jump in here on the quad real quick? My glib answer to that is you should be so lucky. You know, just to get on my soapbox about quad stigma, I think, you know, I'm really proud that I live in the quad, because the quad is where Radcliffe College was. The quad was up until the mid 1900s, where all of the female identifying students who went to Harvard lived and made friends and took their classes and studied. So I think that's, you know, a really amazing tradition to be a part of. And I would also say that in the era before Harvard's houses were randomized, the quad was where a lot of students of color and students from other marginalized identities tended to congregate. And we're proud of that history up here. Currier, speaking of traditions, has a Audrey Bruce Currier dinner. Audrey Bruce Currier is the Radcliffe alum that our house is named after, who was active philanthropist in the civil rights movement, donated a lot of money to Dr. King and other assorted groups, where we go over the history of, you know, how marginalized groups tended to congregate up here. And we say, maybe explicitly, maybe subtly, that a lot of the stigma related to the quad, you may not know this, might be in part because that's where the women and where the people of color tended to live and tended to end up before the houses went randomized. So I think that history is something that is important to consider, and also something to be proud of. I love the quad for more than reasons that we just have singles, but I'll get off my quad soapbox and let Dean Straker and others answer more questions.
No, that's great. It's great to share history. All of our spaces have history, and some for good, some for other reasons and stuff like that. So that's good to share. Another question came through, and that I think Karina will be good to answer this. How will Housing Day work over Zoom?
Yes, so we don't know as of yet. Unfortunately, with everything that's been going on in the last year, our usual plans for Housing Day are not going to happen most likely, but we don't have any additional information as of yet. We will make sure that as we reach out to students and work with the HOCOs or house committees for ideas of how to make Housing Day something to look forward to, we will make sure that we share that information with all of you as it becomes available.
All right, Matt, did you find some of those traditions, or are you still looking?
Still looking. It looks like this list might be a little outdated. So
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Any, Colby or Francis, any traditions? I mean, I think Francis, you mentioned one. Any that you can think of?
Well, I think Karina mentioned the house committees, and so like kind of more casually known as HOCO committees. But basically, like I get a group me message probably, if not every day, like 4 to 5 times a week from our HOCO committee, organizing different events, whether that be like a secret snowflake for right now, people sending each other gifts across the country, maybe even across the world, to climate checks where people talk about relevant issues today happening in our world. So just like really fostering community. There's a lot of ones that are similar among all the houses, but also each house has their little intricacies. So yeah.
All right. So I think we're getting to that time where we might need to, sail out into the evening. Some of us need to still have dinner. So what are some final thoughts that you might want to share with the group about blocking, lottery, fall, spring, anything you want to share with the class of 2024? Karina.
If I could, I think this is one of the few lotteries in life that you cannot lose. All of these houses are incredible. They're each unique in their own way, but they're all your home while you're here. And doesn't matter where you end up, you're going to have, I'm sure, a great time and find great people in there to help and support you.
I think also another thing I would like to add, like though all these houses have great communities and it's going to be where you're living, there's also so much more to Harvard than just like where you sleep. So you'll find communities in other places. So if you at first don't find your niche in your specific house, there's so many other opportunities to do so. And like I said before, nothing's set in stone and you'll find the place just for you, most definitely.
Can I say a few words? Sorry. I think that, yeah, one activity that I do with my entryway every year is I have all my students put their heads down in this meeting where we talk about blocking, and I ask them to raise their hand if they are still up for making friends, or they still feel like they are still looking for their best friends at this point in the year. And so that they all have their heads down, and then they all raise their hands, and I say, okay, everybody, like, open your eyes. And they're all really surprised to realize that, like, no, actually everybody in this room is still open to finding that one best friend, and they're still really looking for that best friend. And so I think that we're all kind of in this together. Like, your best friend is still out there, and you may not have even met them yet. And other people in your entryway, other people in the first year class are still looking for friends. And so don't be ashamed, don't be afraid to initiate a conversation about inviting someone to be your blockmate. I think it's a great opportunity to get to know people better. And just another plug for entryways. Entryways are a great place to find your people to block with. Go to study breaks. Try to get to know the people in your entryways and talk to your proctor. We're really invested in making this a seamless transition for you. And so if you have concerns about it, you're feeling lonely, feel free to reach out, and we can maybe connect you with targeted people in our entryway who may also be looking for people as well to block with. And then also, we're all kind of in the same boat of like Zoom fatigue, Zoom phobia, and Zoom, like, it's just like somewhat awkward still. And so just try to get over that and reach out to people in your classes, reach out to people, chat people up, and then try to make friends in our virtual age right here. And I'm hoping that we can all find you can all find good people to block with and have a good year and for the rest of your time here at Harvard.
I think blocking, you get out of the process what you put into it. And I think the best energy to put into it is just excitement for whatever outcome. I understand that there are nerves. I understand that they're stressed. I understand that you have, your own internal rankings of houses or people that you're going to block with. But I promise that it's going to be okay. And, if you have a positive attitude about it, whatever house shows up in March, just remember that you're going to love it, even if your initial reactions are disappointment, or even if what you're remembering right now is stress. I think I look back on this period of my freshman year, I wasn't super excited about getting Courier. I wasn't super sure if my blockmates were going to be my forever friends, but it all worked out for me. So I promise you, I don't make promises very often, that it'll work out for everybody who's on this Zoom call, and all of your friends in the class who are not on the Zoom call.
One final thing I would end with too is that remembering that blocking and housing is all about blocking is about which friends you'll be with, but housing really is about which community you'll be joining. And so you have, like Karina said so well, it's a lottery you won't be losing. And knowing that the class above you, actually, because of the pandemic, has also never had the chance to live in that house. And so when you're entering that house, it'll be 2 grades worth of people who are really excited to be experiencing the community for the first time and looking to make all new friends. So just knowing that, I think it really will be a unique opportunity to get to meet as many people as you can.
All right. Well, thank you all for participating in tonight's panel and discussion on the housing process for rising sophomores. I just want to make sure that I reiterate to everyone that this has been recorded and it will be posted in probably like the next 48 hours or so. We have to do some closed captioning work on it. But thank you again. Feel free to reach out to either myself, your proctor, any of your past, any of our folks in housing to answer any questions. And we hope that you are having a great reading period. You're excited for your first set of college finals, and that you're also excited to have a little downtime and some winter break. So thank you and have a good rest of your night.